Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of mercy and peace to you, dear viewers. Welcome to She in Islam. Today we have another episode, and we would like to really much talk about children, because children are really the base of society. Those are going to be the future generation. And with me today is a dear friend of mine, Dr. Teresa Lesher. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on this show. I really enjoy having conversations with you, and it's a real honor that you're actually coming on my show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Dr. Teresa has her PhD in information science, and she has something very special to say about 3 things that she feels are very important to teach our children and to instill and ingrain in our children. And I think the topic actually is so important because nowadays, I'm sorry, before I continue, I must say that Dr. Teresa has 4 children, mashallah, 4
They're grown
children,
up.
and 3 grandchildren and 2 on the way. Am I correct?
Right. That's right.
So mashallah, so you've been through it, you've raised them, mashallah,
yes.
So you've seen it all basically. You have boys and girls, right?
That's right.
So, you've seen the boys, you've seen the girls, you've seen the toddlerhood, you've seen the middle school years, the teenagehood, the adulthood now, and now again with the grandchildren. So
right.
I think you as I as well, we realize how important it is to find out what it is we need to teach our children. Our children nowadays are lost. In general, kids are lost. They get bombarded with pop culture, science, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but some of those kids try to find their answers for life, their answers for their problems, their heartaches, their, whatever they're going through, they're turning to the wrong things.
Yeah.
So what are some of those things that we should be teaching our children?
Well, of course, as a Muslim, believing that the Quran is a divine revelation, believing that this Quran was sent to us by our Creator, we have to admit that our Creator knows what He's saying when He tells us or when He gives us guidance for our lives. And that's exactly what the Quran is. So we have to, as parents, we have to be very, very familiar with the contents of the Quran, and also we have to convey that information to our children.
It's a big responsibility if you think about it. A lot of parents kind of just, we read the Quran to ourselves, we go to the mosque, we read it. In Ramadan, we try to read all of it from beginning to end, but do we ever think about what responsibility is on our shoulders to convey that exact message to the children? I think a lot of parents just leave it up to the Quran teacher in school, right?
That's right, but that's not enough. We should make sure that our children know how to read the Quran, that they learn how to recite it with tajweed, so they recite it properly, that they can understand it, especially in cross-cultural situations, or bilingual situations. They should be able to understand it.
So would it be okay, do you think, let's say, because you and I were not native Arabic speakers,
right.
So if we're trying to explain the Quran to our children, is it okay to explain it in whatever language they're comfortable with?
Definitely, because the principles or the ideas in the Quran can be conveyed in any language. And I think, basically that after we teach them about the Quran and its divine origin and its value in our lives, that we can really approach the Quran as being like 3 main subject areas that we need to teach our kids. Mm-hmm. So one of the subjects of the Quran, I believe, is about Islam, or it's about the rules of how to live as an Islamic community. And then we derive a lot of our fiqh from this.
So fiqh, sharia, would that fall under that? Okay.
Exactly. So this is one topic. A second topic that we can really get from the Quran that's very important is our iman, or our faith. And there's lots of verses and whole chapters that really address the topic of faith. And then the third topic that is very important is our behavior with, first of all, ourselves, with our families, our communities, even with ignorant people or enemies, and our ethics and morals and behavior. So this we can fall under the category of ihsan.
Yeah, so we can build a good society.
That's right.
And a society is actually the big base for individual happiness and fulfillment if you're in a functioning and proper and decent society.
Right. So, we have to look at the Quran as our guidebook, for a good life. And we have to make sure that our kids understand how important this book is for our lives, because not only does it tell us how to behave in our communities, it tells us how to behave in our homes, and it teaches us really how to think. And not only that, of course, but it shows us the consequences of right actions and wrong actions, of right decisions and wrong decisions. So we can extend our happiness not only in this life, but also, of course, in the life to come.
SubhanAllah, you know how people turn to instruction manuals and guidebooks and, you know, galore. I mean, they pull out an instruction manual. How does the video player or the DVD player work, right? But they don't go to the Quran, sadly, to find out how do we work? How do I work as a human being?
Exactly.
Right? We're always going to all sorts of sources, and the most important source for our everyday behavior, for strengthening our insides as well as our outsides and around us, is right there in front of us in the Quran.
Exactly. So as parents, we have a huge responsibility. As I said, first to try to understand ourselves, and then go on that journey with our kids so that they will always turn to the Quran when they need advice.
SubhanAllah. So how can children, who can help the children understand the Quran? I mean, it's, you know, it's not an easy book sometimes to understand.
Yeah. Well, I think if you, as a parent, of course, you need to read as much as you can to be familiar with it. But I've found a way through I've read the Quran many times, and I've really realized that there are basically three main sections of the Quran. The first part really deals with how to live as a community. And in the first third of the Quran, the first 9 surahs, we have a lot of detail about fiqh. For example, how to pray, how to fast, the rules of Hajj, rules of marriage and divorce, rules of trade and debts, you know, like recording debts, even rules about war and peace. So much of the information that we have about how to live in a community as Muslims, we can find in the first 9 surahs.
So a lot of fiqh and sharia.
Yes, that's right. Of course, we must use the sunnah or the hadith as a
support,
as a support, to explain further, you know, to get more of the finer details.
To extend on the topics.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we can't read the Quran to the exclusion. Exactly, of the sunnah, but they go hand in hand. So we read the Quran first to understand the main principles, and then we can go to the sunnah for the finer details.
For the tafsir often also.
That's right. So that would take care of the first part, and I think that this should be maybe some of the first things that we teach our children, especially, you know, by the time they're 7, they have to already start learning about the principles of prayer. So even from a very early age, we can start teaching them.
We can fall back onto that first third of the Quran.
Right.
So we'll hold that thought, inshallah, and we will continue about the other parts of the Quran with the next segment, inshallah. Just be with us for just a short break.
One song can change a moment. One idea can change a world. One step can start a journey. But a prayer can change even the impossible.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our topic on how important it is to teach our children the value of the Quran as our guidebook. And we are with Dr. Teresa, who is very interesting in that subject. Mashallah, you've got some very interesting, to me, new information about how the Quran is possibly divided generally. We're not saying specifically divided, but generally divided into 3 subject areas. And you said the first section of the Quran is mostly addressing fiqh, sharia, rules, how to do something, how not to do something, and so on and so forth. So what would the second part of the Quran then include?
Well, the second part of the Quran, this is in my opinion and from my own personal experience through reading, of course, the Quran many times. The second third of the Quran, which starts with Surah Hud, and this is the story of a prophet, and it continues for another 200 pages if you're reading the Arabic. It really talks a lot about issues around faith or Iman. So, for example, we have a lot of surahs in this section that are named after prophets. Okay, Surah Hud and Yunus and Yusuf and Ibrahim. So many of the prophets are mentioned. Even if the prophet isn't the title of the surah. There's a lot of information in the surahs about prophets and their peoples. And then we learn a lot of issues that are related to faith and how these prophets came and talked to their people, telling them about faith. Also in this section we learn a lot about angels, a lot of things from the unseen. Okay, we have a lot of information about angels in this second section, that there are guardian angels around us, there are angels to record our deeds, there are angels that take us at death, there are angels praying for us. So we learn
things that strengthen our faith.
Definitely. There's a lot of information also, for example, talking about the universe. So there are a lot of verses that talk about the solar system, about the plants and animal systems on Earth, about the mountains, about the seas and rivers.
Amazing. That part always fascinates me, you know.
So this really builds up your faith, because you know that the Creator has done that, and He explains some of His wisdom in that, and He's asking you to look at the universe to really solidify your faith, to be certain.
To look at those signs that He's showing.
Exactly.
And subhanAllah, you know, I find that there's more and more, the more science advances, the more information actually comes out in the Quran that's like, Allahu Akbar, you know, these things of, like there's a scholar called Dr. Zaghlul Najjar.
Yeah.
And he's a geologist, and at the same time he gives Islamic speeches. And in one of his speeches, I remember one thing very particular about this is about the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the position of the stars. Yeah. And he says, possibly a possible scientific explanation could be why by the position of the stars and not by the stars themselves. So he started to think about the stars and saying that the many light years that the stars are away, and the closest star to us is the sun, which is 8 minutes in light years away from us. So the closest star not even being, you know, immediately visible, only after 8 minutes. So any other star, there's millions of stars out there that are thousands and millions and billions of light years away, whose light only reaches us after 1,000,000 years. So we can't ever see the star. We can only see the position it was in 1 billion years ago.
Wow.
So he was saying that maybe, wallahu alam, that the ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the position of the stars could be due to that wisdom.
That's very interesting.
So, mashallah, yani that part of the Quran is very fascinating, you know, and it builds your faith.
Yeah, it does. It builds your faith and it strengthens it. There's also a lot of talk in this middle section of the Quran. It uses a lot of parables that make you think. It makes you like sort of turn inward and contemplate over the meaning of the Quran. And there's also a lot of examples of miracles. For example, if we look in Surah Al-Kahf, or the cave, which is right in the middle of the Quran, we see there are so many miracles in there. Of course, named after the people who slept in the cave for 300 years.
Right.
And there are many other miracles that are explained in this section of the Quran to make you have faith in things that you can't always see. And that really is what faith is. It's talking about past peoples that you've never met. It's talking about prophets that you've never met. It's talking about miracles. It's talking about things in the universe that you can't see, you've never witnessed yourself. So all of this comes together to build your faith. Now as parents, we can, when we're teaching our children about the solar system, we can look at the verses about solar system and say, look what Allah said about the solar system. When we're talking about, you know, some strange happenings, strange phenomena, we can say, you know, there are a lot of miracles in the Quran too. Let's have a look at those. And so the child then gets like a relationship with faith and gets a relationship with these verses from the Quran.
Exactly, and so and especially because faith is the base for being able to apply all those rules and regulations in the first section. I mean, sadly, you know, some people go through life just thinking about the haram, the halal, how to do this, how to do that, but that inner strength and faith sometimes is missing. And so, you know, when you have these strength of faith, when the strength of faith, then it's so easy to apply those rules and regulations because you also have the faith that those rules are good for us.
Exactly.
They're not just because in a book.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you know, also, I mean, throughout the Quran, you know, there's a lot of information, but especially in the third part, in the second part, there is a little information about the hereafter. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be, you know, compensation for deeds. So this is, of course, talking about paradise and hellfire. Not a lot of detail at this point, but just the fact that it's there and it's something that you need to be aware about. So again, it gets the mind thinking about these things that we can't see that we've been told to believe in. Knowing that it comes from our Creator, we have no choice but to believe in it. So
right.
it has
and
to
then
be
gives
true.
us that strong foundation that we need to become good functioning Muslims. And so
That's
we'll
right.
hold that and go to the third section of the Quran, inshallah, the third,
Yes.
in a minute. So we'll be back after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear viewers. Welcome back to our episode about children and the things that we should be teaching children. And with us is our guest, Dr. Teresa Lesher. And so, Dr. Teresa, we were just talking about how the Quran, how you've, through your reading and your experience with the Quran, have seen, kind of experienced and discovered that it's divided into 3 sections with 3 major topics. We're not saying that they don't overlap, and of course they get repeated and so on, but like a major thought going through a third of each section of the Quran. The first being Sharia and fiqh, a lot of rules and regulations and how we should deal with others and how we should deal in society. And the middle part being about Iman, strengthening Iman, a lot of the miracles, a lot of science in there. A lot of stories of the prophets. So what is the third part about, and why is that important for our kids? Why is it important to teach our children now?
Well, in my experience, the third part, it gets very personal. And I've always, whenever reading the Quran, when I start getting toward the end, I start having very strong emotional responses. And I think that, the third part of the Quran really addresses the reader as an individual. And it wants to teach him how to deal with morals, with ethics, how to perfect his behavior. So, for example, there are a lot of, there are some more rules in this section, but it's more on a personal level. It talks about clothing. It talks about behavior with others, like how should you address an ignorant person? How should you address a hostile person? How should you act in your family? There's even a rule in in the Quran, in this last section, about before you enter the room, you should knock on the door. It's just such a small etiquette. But this last third of the Quran has a lot of these little rules that make a person's behavior more perfect. It's not the big rules that govern the whole society, but it's the small rules that govern personal behavior or personal etiquette. So it even talks a lot about our speech and our thoughts. For example, this last section of the Quran, I always feel very self-conscious when I read it, because many of the ayahs say Allah knows and Allah hears, Allah sees. So it makes me realize that Allah is understanding every thought that crosses my mind. He hears it.
Just like the uh-oh.
Yes. And so, it becomes, like I said, it becomes very personal. So Allah's knowledge is a theme that's repeated a lot in this last part. He knows what's in the hearts of men. He knows what's in the thoughts of men.
So it's kind of like a self-check, it's like
Definitely.
Check yourself.
Definitely.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So that's really important for kids.
Yes.
And for everybody, of course,
for everybody.
But for us to teach our children.
Yeah.
And so you were saying also that the last third of the Quran is talking about the Day of Judgment and the hellfire and the good, so that the rewards and the incentives and the things that might keep us away from the punishment.
That's right. Toward the end of the Quran, the descriptions of hellfire become very graphic, very frightening. when you read them, I mean, even now as I'm talking about it, I get goosebumps, I get shivers because the language is so descriptive. And as if you can see hellfire when you're reading it. In the beginning of the Quran, and toward the middle, it says that they're there, but the descriptions are not as vivid. And also, on the other hand, we have very graphic descriptions of paradise, down to what we're going to wear and how we're going to sit, and the carpets and the bracelets.
So a lot of incentives to what is waiting for us if we do the right thing, and what might be waiting for us if we make our bad choices.
Right. And actually, what you said is exactly right, because toward the end, there's a lot of comparison between evil and good, between darkness and light, between good choices and bad choices. And there are a lot of personal questions that are really directed to the reader personally, on a very personal level. It says, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? And then it's in other places it says, is there another God beside Allah? And so this section has a lot of personal questions that make you stop and think, and you feel like you must answer. So this is sort of like preparing you for your final judgment, preparing you for, like making your decision that I am going to be the best Muslim I can be. Because the consequences are just so clear that you feel like you're being guided to make a decision. And then the most interesting thing to me is when you get to the last 2 pages of the Quran, what does it do after all of this? After it's built you up, it's told you how to live, it's given you the faith or the reasons why you should live that way. In the end, it guides you to making a choice. What are the last 2 pages about? The last among the last 4 surahs start with the word say. It's telling you, say, now's your chance, now's the time for you to make your commitment. Say, there is only one God. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Okay, so it's prompting you to make that decision, to make your
like an affirmation. Like, yes, I've read it all, I got it.
Right.
And now is my time to make that.
Yes, I'm ready to be committed. I'm ready to be committed in this faith. So, going back to what we teach our children, we teach them the rules, we teach them the faith, but we also have to teach them, first of all, the etiquette of personal behavior, especially in dealing with others in intimate levels, our families, our neighbors and so on. And then how to deal with ourselves and this information, this knowledge that we have to make the right choice. And then your choice, it's up to you. Allah says many times, especially in the end, it's up to you.
There's no force in religion.
Exactly. If you want to believe, you believe. If you don't, you don't have to.
And it doesn't take away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, or it doesn't give him anything. It doesn't make a difference.
It's all for you.
It's all for us.
But whatever you choose, there's going to be a consequence. And so children need to be taught.
As life, usually everything we choose, right? There's our choices and our consequences. That's what we always tell the children in school. I'm so sorry I have to give you a timeout, but that was your choice. I don't want to give you that timeout. I really don't. I would rather have seen you make a good choice so I can actually give you that sticker. But you made that choice, and the child feels like, oh my goodness, I made that choice.
Exactly.
So we'll be back in just a minute, okay? So dear viewers, we'll go for a quick break and we'll continue on this really fascinating subject.
M is for the million things she gave me. O means only she's growing old. T is for the tears she shed to save me. H is for her heart of purest gold. E is for her eyes with love light shining. R means right, and right she'll always be. Put them all together, they spell mother, a word that means the world to me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are with Dr. Teresa Lesher on a very fascinating subject about the Quran and teaching the Quran to our children, because the Quran is our guidebook, like you said, and our children are our responsibility. We do need to guide them. Like even when we buy a new TV, we go into the instruction manual. We've got children, we've got new human beings, right? A new commodity, but of course human beings, and we need to give them the guidebook for life. So can you just quickly summarize for us how the Quran is divided and how that general division helps us teach our children?
Yeah, well, of course, it's not a very hard division, but generally throughout my reading, I've noticed that the first third of the Quran really has a lot of the rules, the Sharia, how to live as a community. It talks about prayer, fasting, Hajj, and also dealing with trade and families and so on. It's the fiqh of how to live as a family. The second part of the Quran, in my opinion, has more faith-based issues. It talks a lot about prophets. It talks about things of the unseen like angels, paradise, and hellfire. Of course, throughout the Quran, we learn about Allah in every part of the Quran. But also in the middle section, we learn a lot about the universe, we learn about miracles, and we have parables that help us to think and build our certainty that this Quran is coming from a divine source. And then we reach the last part of the Quran where it gets much more intense, the language gets stronger, and there are more rules, of course, but more of at a personal level, like how I conduct myself as a person, how do I dress, how do I talk to people, and like the etiquette in a family or something.
So there's a lot of questions, like so that you feel like you're being asked, and I've got to find an answer to this.
Yeah.
I have to, like you're being asked.
Yes, it gets very personal toward the end, and the reader is guided to make a decision that he is going to accept this book as his guidebook, and he knows that there are going to be consequences depending on the choice that he makes. So these are the things that we need to teach our kids. If we're ever confused about what to do, we can find guidance in the Quran.
Go back to the guidebook.
Yes.
Go back to the instruction manual.
That's right.
SubhanAllah. So nowadays we face, mashallah, you're the mom of 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Yeah. And I'm sure that you have experienced, the challenges that your children face in this society nowadays, even in a very protected society such as Kuwait. I think they all grew up in Kuwait since they were babies, right. and alhamdulillah, we have that blessing of actually being here and being in a, so to say, protected society. They don't have to deal with a lot of those things that are thrown at them in a Western society. But just in one sentence or 2 or 3 sentences, how did that help you, that realization that you came to the Quran in raising your children?
Well, it just helped me to sort of put labels on, okay, I need to teach them some of the rules, I need to help them build their faith, I need to teach them some personal etiquette, and also drill home the fact that your choices are your choices, and there are going to be consequences, good or bad, so It's up to you.
Exactly, so you gave them the manual, you gave them the how-to, but at the end, it's your choice.
Right.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for being on our show, Dr. Teresa, or Terry, because you're my dear friend.
It was a pleasure,
inshallah,
Suzanne.
I hope to host you soon again, inshallah, with some more interesting topics. And I'm sure that on that topic in particular, I could listen to you for so long, and we could go on and talk some more, inshallah. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us again on this episode. And we hope you have a really nice iftar, inshallah, in a group with family and friends. And don't forget your Taraweeh tonight in the masjid or at home. Just pray, inshallah, make lots of dua. Don't waste these precious days and nights of Ramadan. And we will see you for another episode tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.